you're all involved in sort of the academic side of things, but at the same time, in the back of your mind, and I know, for instance, like the Derby Middle School, and I know workshops are done at the library about career-oriented decisions. In other words, at some point, you never want to stop learning, obviously, but you have to, at some point, the practical nature is to hopefully get into a career that's rewarding, that's, satisfying, that's financially, prudent, things like that. So I guess, Kathy, if you could talk a little bit about some of the workshops that are done here about career building, whether it could just be for kids, and I also know even for adults you have, the career Connecticut Works, I believe it is, shows up periodically, that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, well, with these economic times, obviously those programs are becoming more and more popular. We have several different ones. The Connecticut Department of Labor comes monthly to do career development workshops. And like you mentioned, the Connecticut Works comes with their career coach and parks outside the library. It's equipped with a full computer lab, and participants go on the bus and they're given tips and websites and things on where to search. We also have a couple of databases that can be accessed here at the library or at home by using a Derby Public Library card. One of those is called Job Now, and with that, prospective employees can update resumes, get tips on interviewing, things like that. We also have a database called Learning Express, which is particularly helpful for GED or English as a second language students that have sample tests. It's also good for high school students. It has samples of the SATs. So all that we're trying to, help.
Now, in addition to databases, though, do you, like for instance, interviewing or cover letters, do you actually have a workshop or something that actually has mock interviews, or where you can actually practice writing a cover letter, give it to somebody, get some feedback on whether or not that was would get them the job? That kind
Well, that's where the Connecticut Department of Labor workshops come in. Topics have varied from the art of interviewing to advanced resume writing to job search strategies. So and that they have trained coaches that are here available.
Now, like I mentioned, I'm aware the Derby Middle School recently started a career-oriented thing where instead of waiting till, typically you wait till high school and you think about you're going to go to college, or maybe you go to a tech school like Emmett O'Brien or something like that, or are you going to, what are you going to do beyond high school? Does even at the elementary school level, does St. Mary's St. Michael's get into having kids talk about what they want to do when they grow up, kind of thing?
Well, right now we're in the middle of recruitment season. Every Catholic high school in the area and the technical schools, they come and make a presentation to our 7th and 8th graders. In fact, Emmett O'Brien was there today. And they do a great job. They bring a lot of information, usually a PowerPoint, and they bring students with them to talk to the children. So just to let them know there are choices out there. Right. And I hope that we could get Derby High School to come down, because last year I know Mr. Thompson had said he was going to, and the year gets busy, but I think it's important that they all come in and talk to the children, or spend a day shadowing.
It's always a good question for teachers or counselors to be asking students, really at any age.
Absolutely.
What do you see ahead for yourself? Not that you're necessarily going to stick to that as a youngster, but I find that students who have some answer to that. What do I want to be after high school? What do I see myself doing? How do I picture myself as a success? That those students are able to focus more effectively on their studies and get more out of school because they have a purpose to it, other than just showing up.
Plus, they do the research of whatever that is. I mean, it used to be like if your kid said, "Oh, I want to be an astronaut," and you think, as a parent or as a teacher, you think, "Oh, well, is that really possible?" And you kind of make judgments and almost like provide opinions. I've substitute taught in this area. And when a kid says that, why not just let him go? Well, what would be involved? What would you do? You basically take him or her very seriously, and say, even if it's something that you think there really isn't in this economy is not a very career-oriented decision or whatever. Because one, you never know, and people who have a passion about anything, they just if they go to the library every day and read about it on the computer, they're Googling it all the time. They're going to learn about it to the point where maybe they can make something out of something that a jaded adult, let's say, would maybe not really think is possible.
Well, a lot of times the youngsters' imagination as to what they can do is limited by what they see on television, or what they see in their family. And there are literally thousands and thousands of different walks of life that you can pursue, and if you've never heard of them, then you won't even think about it. So that career fair that the middle school sponsored this year was great. The students were able to walk around the gymnasium, stop at certain stations for 10 or 15 minutes at a time. And there were medical people there, there were legal people there, folks in the military.
Do you know how what decision-making process was as to which types of careers were shown during that?
I'm not sure. I wasn't involved in actually doing that, but I think the effort was to reach out to folks here in the city and in the valley who represent a range of career opportunities and experiences, have them come in, talk a little bit about their work, talk about how schooling prepared them to be qualified to do these kinds of things, so that youngsters could begin to think about their own future and then see the connection between that and what their teachers are asking them to do on a daily basis. And when students think that way, they take things more seriously and they begin to organize their learning in a way that's much more powerful for them.
Absolutely, and just the idea, you think about the effect that the internet has and on gathering information, on exposing them. Yes, they may not on a daily basis or a personal basis get exposed to certain careers like we did or when we had, but at the same time, they also get exposed. They hear about this thing, on some YouTube video that they saw, and they wonder about it, and it becomes, and then suddenly you can be involved in any kind of research, really, from that standpoint. Of course, as a parent or teacher, you got to make sure it's valid and not going to get them on a bad path. But at the same time, it definitely the use of the internet and the use of technology today for job searching or job criteria or job wanting. What you want to actually do is it actually opens kids even more. And I guess that makes me think to that point. If you just think about technology and given what you had said before, just in general, where do you see technology fitting in with educating students today, or moving them to the next step in this economy and going forward?
Well, as you said, Mark, I think the potential is virtually limitless. And I think we're going to see in the next 5 or 10 years an increasing shift, particularly at the secondary level, toward online learning or using that access to the internet as a source of instruction and a source of information. Years and years ago, we gathered everybody up into a schoolhouse because that's where the information was. Then I can remember as a kid myself, one day Dad came home with an encyclopedia. And now all of a sudden you didn't have to go. Most of the information was still in the school, but now some of it was right in the living room. And then now that's advanced to a point now where really most of the information in the world is not in the schoolhouse anymore. And yet in many ways schools are still organized as if it were. So I think this calls upon us to rethink how we make the most efficient use of our talented faculty and other resources. I was just having a conversation earlier today with one of my colleagues about the dilemma in foreign languages. Again, with a small high school, we only offer 2 languages, Spanish and Italian. We don't offer German, we don't offer French, we don't offer Mandarin. You can go down the list because you might only have a handful of youngsters who are interested. Could we envision a day, perhaps not too far in the future, where we contract with an online language teaching company, and the teacher is transformed rather than trying to teach 25 students how to speak a particular language, they may have a caseload of 25 students, but they're helping them learn through an online format in whatever language they wanted to learn, whether it's Chinese or Arabic or whatever it might be. So the teacher is more the coach and the guide and the counselor, and less the deliverer of every lesson, because there are other ways now where students can get very high quality lessons from highly qualified instructors delivered over the internet at a much less of a cost. So I think there's a very interesting book out for people interested in this field, a fellow from the Harvard Business School by the name of Clayton Christensen. And the title of the book is Disrupting Class: How Online Learning is Going to Transform the World, or something like that. And that's basically his belief that by the end of this decade, he believes that more than 50% of the high school courses in this country will in fact be taught online. And why is that? Two reasons. One is these courses are becoming increasingly powerful. The bandwidth is expanding. The opportunity to have, high quality video and interaction. Second, the cost is coming down and down. And third, the constriction on public resources is forcing people like us to take a second look at the alternatives to the traditional classroom, where you're paying somebody to stand up in front of the room and deliver the whole program. So Christensen thinks that we're on the edge of a tipping point here, where at least at the secondary level, schools are going to be compelled to embrace this technology, not just as a tool on the side, but as a centerpiece to the instructional program.
Hi, I'm Pam Lorenzo. I'm the chair of the Valley Early Childhood Task Force. And for those of you who are wondering about kindergarten registration for the following towns will take place in January of 2012. In Ansonia, it will be at the Resource Fair at Prendergast School on January 21st from 9 to 1 p.m. We do have a snow date of January 28th. In Derby, at all of the elementary schools between the week of January 17th and January 20th. In Seymour, we will also be doing registration at all of the elementary schools from January 10th through January 12th, and also at the Seymour Public Library, January 11th through the 25th, between 5 and 7 p.m. And Shelton, we will do also at all the elementary schools, the week of January 22nd. Remember, kindergarten is the foundation for future learning. Thank you.
Schools are going to be compelled to embrace this technology, not just as a tool on the side, but as a centerpiece to the instructional program.
I think at the elementary school it's the same thing. I only have 4 smart boards at this point, but the goal is to get one in every room. And I mean, the kids are way ahead of us. This is how they learn. And so we have catching up to do as the adults, but I attended a workshop last year, and they said if you have a whiteboard in your classroom, it should be on 75% of the time. I mean, that's where the instruction should be. And I even have a touch board in the preschool room because, it's designed for the pre-K kindergarten children, and it's fabulous, the interaction there. The problem is that the technology changes so quickly. It seems like you're just purchasing something that's already outdated, and it's a cycle, so financially it is a challenge for us, but it is the way to go, and that's the way the children learn. They don't want to get the big, thick book like we did.
At the same time, I think the availability of this technology will allow educators to focus more on the human side of education, so that teachers can spend more time getting to know their students on a personal level, and helping to deal with issues of engagement and motivation and self-discipline, rather than so much of their time gathering information and organizing lessons, when someone else can do that. And let's be honest, how different is it to learn algebra in Derby as it is to learn it in Hartford or Farmington? I mean, do we really have to reinvent the wheel in every town, every day, every class?
Good point.
Why not take advantage of the resources that are out there, and then let's have our teachers do what only a professional educator can do, and that is understand students, help them to organize their thinking, to direct their motivation toward a worthy goal. That's something I don't think you're going to get online.
No, you're right. I mean, I agree with that. That's where we're headed. But I think it's very glaring that when you do an online course, you don't have the social interaction necessarily. They're the same. You do have some, but and it's the same knock on social networking that some places have and some places don't. But I think if you do that, and there are some top-ranked universities that are now offering all these courses. But for me, going to school meant not just being in the classroom, but after class, talking to the professor if you had a question that came up, things like that. All of that sort of impromptu thing that happens that really doesn't happen. At least I don't see a vehicle for it to happen on online courses yet. Maybe it will get to that.
And that is a problem, because part of human nature is the desire to relate to other people.
Right, exactly.
And so that suggests that some kind of hybrid model where you're taking advantage of the technology for gathering and presenting information and for connecting people to other parts of the world, but then you're relying on the educators to provide that human touch and those connections among students and that sort of dimension.
I thought you nailed it when you said about, the human connecting, emotional connection. I mean, that was the biggest thing when I did my student teaching was, you can get any kid really, if they trust you and they feel connected with you, either from a relationship, either between classes or during class, you can teach them anything, really. I mean, it's just, especially at the elementary school age, but even when you get to middle school and high school, it's like when the kids buy in, and just the opposite, if they don't buy into what's going on, even if they're smart enough, they won't necessarily grab it. So you really have to, but I agree with you, and if teachers were, if teaching, the teaching profession, let's say, focused on that, which I think they do, at least, I mean, I have limited experience with that, but if they focused on that aspect of it, of, how do you relate to your kids, how do you emotionally connect with your kids, because once that's present, then you try to teach them, even if it's, higher order physics or whatever, they'll learn it because they believe that you have, their best interests in mind.
I bet you've probably seen a lot of things, Kathy, in the library in terms of how much time people take looking through these shelves and pulling off books. And I'm going to guess, but you'll know better than I do, that a lot of the younger folks skip the shelves and go right online. You can find things more quickly.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, can you track or quantify that in any way, or just sort of based on your gut feeling what you've seen over the years? But
Our circulation remains pretty steady.
does it, in terms of actual books?
Yes, yes, but when they come in and ask a question, I need information on, we're doing a report on any topic, and we direct them to the shelves. They're like, oh, no, I want to go, I want to go on the computer.
Yeah, exactly.
Which, as talking about technology, that's a big role of the library today.
Does this library or any other libraries that you're aware of actually teach kids how to research? I mean, like when I substitute teach, for instance, and they have an assignment on George Washington, almost infallibly, kids will go to Wikipedia initially. And the first thing I say is, first of all, I explain, a lot of them don't even know that that's, anybody can enter on that. So I try to explain, look, that's not a credible, if you want to get some general information to get an idea, but don't start referencing, that reference. You have to go to see the bottom one where the reference is, you have to go to the actual source. And they're like, oh, really, I didn't know that. That kind of thing. Does the library do that? In other words, teach kids, if they are going to gravitate to the computer, which is perfectly understandable, does it offer how do you do research? How to research a book report? Those things, if they're not, are you guys thinking about doing that?
We don't have a formal class, but we're fortunate we have a part-time young adult librarian, Tony Delos, and so he works with them individually. Right. And he's always showing them, the reliable sources to go to and things like that. But again, as far as the technology, the schools have the technology, but I think a lot of people don't realize that many families in Derby still don't have computers at home.
They come here.
Well, that's the interesting thing. I hear that a lot. I do, right, but yet the libraries do. Now, I don't know if you guys are set up to accommodate every family.
Well, I was going to say, we have...
But the thing is, they still do. So I don't know is that really a bona fide excuse or reason not to do computer-oriented things when the libraries do have it? Do you know what I'm saying?
Oh, no, I just think of that's a big role of the library today, is to kind of like level the field, to provide these services that people don't have available at home. We have just over 20 computers available between adults, young adults, and children, and they are always in use.
I a lot of times see some of our school students here in the summer, here after hours, and probably a lot of those youngsters, this is the only place outside of school where they have that opportunity. Of course, when they're in school, they're mostly in class, so to sit down for an hour or two and really pursue a topic, you're probably offering them their only shot at that during the day.
Right. And we're trying to keep up with all the new things we have.
Sure.
For the young adults now, we have an iPad available, we have a Zoom tablet available.
Oh, excellent.
So we're trying to, keep up with all the new, but that's a challenge.
And part of the challenge also, and Mark, you alluded to this, now the problem isn't that you can't find information. You've got so much information,
right.
and the challenge is, well, how do you sort it
How do you
out? How do you
disseminate that
determine
information?
what's
Exactly.
really relevant to what I'm trying to do, and how do I distinguish the bogus from the highly credible?
Exactly.
And that's becoming a real skill in this day and age when we're flooded with
Right.
with tons of information and very little time to figure it out.
Yeah, and to your point earlier about kids using that information to decide what they want to do or what their career is, a lot of it's just reading. It's sometimes it could just be the way it's presented. If you were to present, engineering. I mean, I'm an engineer, but an engineering can be a very sort of rote sort of career if you just think about it. I mean, unless you're involved in something very unique. But if it's, let's say it was, a bunch of animations and YouTube videos and stuff like that. Meanwhile, something really exciting like, becoming a singer or something like that, if they didn't have any YouTube videos and just read about it, they'd be like, well, that looks kind of boring. So a lot of it is sometimes just the stimuli by the way this information is presented to the kids, and leave it to the people who are savvy enough to market it, so kids will like it, or young adults. And that's the thing. That's where you got to be. It's almost like, infomercials, kind of in a sense. Like you got to, okay, is this really a bona fide way to go, or is this sort of like a sales pitch for a career? Do you know what I mean? Get those kids to really scrutinize, what is real, what is reality. I think the idea of, like you mentioned, the school, having a career fair where you have people who actually do that for a living. I mean, that's, and it's right there, one-on-one, and you're assuming that they're credible resources, and they have something to speak on. I mean, that would be ideal, obviously. So anyway, I think we're going to wrap up, if you guys are okay. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, you're very
covered
welcome.
on some really good topics, and thank you very much for coming.
You're welcome.
Tracy?
Thank you.
Kathy?
Mark? Thank you, Mark. Nice to see you again.
Thank you. If you have any comments on the show, feel free to provide feedback, questions, or suggestions to lookingupvalley@gmail.com or check out our Facebook page and dedicated website. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Pam Lorenzo. I'm the chair of the Valley Early Childhood Task Force. And for those of you who are wondering about kindergarten registration for the following towns will take place in January of 2012. In Ansonia, it will be at the Resource Fair at Prendergast School on January 21st from 9 to 1 p.m. We do have a snow date of January 28th. In Derby, at all of the elementary schools between the week of January 17th and January 20th. In Seymour, we will also be doing registration at all of the elementary schools from January 10th through January 12th, and also at the Seymour Public Library, January 11th through the 25th, between 5 and 7 p.m. And Shelton, we will do also at all the elementary schools, the week of January 22nd. Remember, kindergarten is the foundation for future learning. Thank you.